A superhero leapt across the rooftops, and Emmett watched from the 7 o'clock bus. He turned in his seat to follow them, but they were gone as quickly as they appeared. It could have been Lux or Grey Knight. They were both active on this side of Adelphi, but Emmett couldn't see well enough from the street. Emmett turned back around in his seat, smiling. No one else on the bus had noticed, but he had seen them. Then again, he'd also been lucky enough to look up at the right time. He'd been reading an article on his phone about the Summit of Heroes and their recent battle with the anti-champions. Their battle had started in Falworth, but the summit forced them into the surrounding desert where the most powerful teams of supers and villains had fought for 2 days, turning miles of sand dunes into craters and glass. Reliable eyewitness accounts of such battles were scarce, but Emmett read all he could find anyway. Instead of going back to his phone, Emmett savored the moment and watched the streets of Eastside pass. When he was younger and riding the school bus, Emmett used to imagine himself leaping across rooftops and running faster than a car. Few days went by that he didn't daydream about it. But the older Emmett got, the fewer options he had. He wasn't the son of an old god, didn't fall into a vat of radioactive acid, know magic, or have any telekinetic powers. The closer he got to graduating college, the more absurd he felt even reading about superheroes. He was almost an adult, a real adult. Now he only daydreamed about spontaneously getting powers every other day. Still, no amount of growing up could wipe the smile off his face. This was the first super he'd seen in weeks, and he took it as a sign that it was going to be a good day. Maybe even a good week. The east side of Bellport was made up of technology companies and their research buildings, as well as the satellite campus of Bellport University. It was also where Emmett spent most of his time. He hopped off the bus on 34th Street, pushed back his dark, shaggy hair, and put in his earbuds and music. Then he pulled up his hood and started walking. He'd been on a synthwave kick the last few months, listening to artists like Starquake, Lime Profond, and Endure. It just fit. He was a tech major listening to new age music. Pieces were falling into place for Emmett. He'd finally found a major he loved, was almost at the end of his degree, finally got an internship, and got out of the house. The music was a bonus. Emmett walked down the street, ignoring the screens and advertisements that lined the buildings while glancing to the rooftops in hopes of catching another glance of a super. Beauty cream from Gnosis, the latest phones from Aquarius, fusion-powered cars by Moswell. Emmett ignored them all. No more supers, not this morning anyway. Emmett sighed and followed the sidewalk onto campus. Then again, it was a wonder why any supers were patrolling right now. What serious criminals got started this early in the morning? The East Side Satellite Campus consisted of half a dozen buildings, all devoted to engineering and health sciences. It was a self-contained mirror of the surrounding sector, its own little ecosystem. It even shared the love of glass that all tech companies seem to have. Most graduates and promising students would get jobs and internships just a few blocks away, snatched up by the research and development wings of those companies. Emmett still had to finish out the semester. It was the end of February with 3 months left to go, but he was lucky to have already landed an internship. It might not have been with one of the usual big-name companies, but his work with Dr. Venture was much more engaging than being just another proverbial cog in the machine. In fact, it had been harder to focus these last 6 months since getting his internship at the professor's small lab. Classes felt like a grind compared to his work in the afternoon. Emmett climbed the stairs of the A building to his product and process engineering class, nodded to the 2 people he was cool with, and took his seat in the back of the room. He toggled his phone to his police scanner app. It had been a relatively quiet week as far as supers went. Some scuffles between longtime rivals like Shatterspike and Death's Hand, and Iso Cauldron and Loverboy at the park on the West End. Honestly, those were the best kinds of super fights, because they resulted in minimal collateral damage. Bystanders and taxpayers stayed happy, and capes and villains got to test each other and work out their creative differences. Emmett listened intently, but after a few minutes of boring police calls, he toggled back to music. Then he opened his notebook to last week's notes and continued doodling in the margins. Sometimes it was wiring diagrams or schematics for inventions. Other times it was tiny superhero battles.
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it. at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.